Welcome to the Tea of Life podcast, where our mission is to transform every attitude of life by encouraging and equipping you to live the life you love and love the life you live. I am your host, Tiffany Thompson. Hey, and welcome to this week's episode of Tea of Life podcast. Today, I'm going to do something a little bit different, and that is I am going to pull from my vault. So for today, we're going to be listening to an episode that was actually recorded back in 2018 when my then co-host and I, April, recorded an episode about school. And the title of that episode is School is Not That Important. And of course, that was a little clickbait title. I admit that because we all know that school is really important. But we talked a lot about the importance of building a relationship, and we called it relationship over educationship. And I have been having a lot of conversations lately that seem to replicate the conversations that kind of inspired that episode. So I have decided to actually pull that episode from our vault and listen to that. It's a lot of fun. April was a great co-host and I miss her. So April, if you're listening to this episode, maybe this will inspire you to come back and do another episode with me soon. But I'm really excited to share this with you guys today. And since April and I recorded this episode, I have graduated one kid from high school, and he is currently attending college because that is what he has chosen to do. How we chose to be more relaxed during our high school years did not affect his college academics at all. He is totally rocking the college courses, and he takes the initiative that he needs in order to make his college experience successful. He was very eager to continue college after graduating high school, and he has done very well. And I hope that you find great value in this. I'm also going to continue my homeschooling high school episodes that I was doing last year, and I'm going to start continuing that after this week's episode. So this is going to be kind of the Kickstarter for those upcoming episodes, and I hope you guys enjoy it today. So stay tuned, and here we go. Okay, so one of the things that we wanted to talk about today was my son actually made a comment to me the other day about how one of his friends is actually in their end of year testing this week already. This is the second week of April, and school is technically not over until the end of May, and they're already doing their end of year testing. It got me to thinking about all the students that are preparing for this, all the parents that are preparing for this as well. All these parents who are preparing emotionally to help their students through this emotionally, or even preparing emotionally to maybe even receive those test scores at the end of summer, not knowing what to expect. Right. And so that just the pressure that we put on ourselves and the pressure that we put on our kids to achieve and to make these good scores is, to me, is really heartbreaking, because I know that these scores really are not that important.
Right. I agree with you. Because it's just not a random test. I get what the tests are for. I think they're for funding for schools. I think because you have tests over material throughout the year, so your children can see how they're doing. Are they retaining the knowledge? I get that, because comprehension is key. You want to be able to comprehend something. You want to be able to understand something. You want to be able to share it in a way that you sound like, hey, I know what I'm talking about, because you know what you're talking about. But the tests I've seen working in the school system years and years ago, I've seen them just take a group of kids in the media center and say, okay, this is how you take the test. It's like, why are you spending time on teaching them how to take the test that they're going to take? Why is that such a big deal? Why can't you just teach them along the way, let them learn, and then, why don't the other tests count for something? The tests that they take all throughout the year. Why doesn't their report card matter? I get that some kids don't test well, and there's other ways to test, but I don't understand. You know what?
I think that it's just basically because they don't want the kids to mess up on the test. So they want to make sure that the kids know exactly, if you are on question 42, that you actually bubble in question 42, and you don't skip that one and bubble it in at 43, because then it makes all the ones after that wrong, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of, but also those test scores count not only for your kids, they count for the school system. And the school system actually receives funding based on test scores. So if you live in an area where your test scores are higher, then that school receives higher funding than a school that receives lower test scores. It's totally screwed up.
That doesn't make sense.
So it boils down to money. It has everything to do with funding for that school.
Isn't there another way that they can get funding? I think our goal is to provide encouragement during this stressful time. Some encouragement.
Some encouragement that school is really not that important.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you had mentioned before from the Washington Post article.
Now that I'm looking at it, I don't know if it's the Washington Post article. The reason I was thinking when you said school's not that important, that reminded me of Paradox episode number 46, School is Not That Important. And on there, I didn't ask for permission to say this, but I really like the podcast Paradox. They're counselors of father-son team.
Paradox, P-A-I-R-A-D-O-C-S.
Right. And I'll have that in the notes. But they have on their website a quote, and I think it might have been Jimmy, the one of the Paradox, that is, the host. One of the hosts, he says, school is the single largest stressor in the kids' lives, in the parents' lives. The problem with education tends to be us, the parents. We are not so subtly communicating to our kids that success and money is the ultimate pursuit in life. Everything else pales in comparison to our kids succeeding academically. It says, I want my children to walk out of my house with the idea of positional worth. Whether they're the president of the United States or a convicted felon, their worth and value in my eyes never changes. He says, praise effort, not grades. Discipline effort, not grades. And I really like that. I really like what he had said also this is Dr. Myers in one of the Paradox. He was talking about education is the important part. Because hatred and bigotry is a result of ignorance, a lack of education. And so you have to look at the schooling part, these tests. I don't know.
All right, so one of the things that we also learned from listening to that podcast and some other research that we've done online is that high school depression statistics are actually on the rise. And right now, according to the latest information that I could find online, it says that 20% of teens before the age of 18 suffer from depression.
That's too much.
So from that, we also found out that 70% of the students often feel stressed by their schoolwork, and 56% reported often or always worrying about such things as grades, tests, and college acceptance. It says a quarter of our students actually struggle with some sort of depression, and 7% in that study had actually cut themselves because of that depression. So with that, we want to talk about how that leads to the suicide rate. And suicide is actually the third leading cause of death among kids from age 10 to 24. So that would be
10.
Middle school to college age. Yes. So 20% of that are students from Ivy League schools. And they're purposely injuring themselves by cutting, burning, or doing something else.
When we're talking about these alarming rates, suicide rates, and just the pressure, the amount of pressure that kids put upon themselves, let me just say that taking a step back this year and homeschooling and having a different route or different approach, I'm not saying that I have it. Oh, I've got the answer. I've been doing something awesome. What I'm saying is I took a step back this year and really saw what is really important in the school day. Waiting in line, what do they really do at school? I get that. I'm not demeaning teachers. I think they're great. My mom's a teacher. So, they do a lot of hard work. And I have a lot of respect for teachers after homeschooling and being responsible for lesson plans and things like that. But what I'm trying to say is I took a step back and really focused on what is important of the school day. What is important? What do I want to teach my kids educationally?
So we did read this article on a girl. I'm not going to say her name, but it is online. You can find this article online. We read it from New York Times. But she actually was a gold medal decathlete. She ran track, represented her school in a statewide girls leadership program, and took 8 advanced placement tests, including one for which she independently prepared for going to class. Now, if my kid did that, I'd be like, yeah, I'm going to step back and you take the reins. Like, you got this, right? But apparently what happened was every day at 5 p.m. her test scores would be uploaded. And her mother would actually look at those test scores. And she would be the first to comment if her grades would ever go down. Her mom would actually comment and say, I see that your grades have dropped. Mm-hmm. To which the girl would respond, I'm sure that's a mistake. And then sure enough, it would be some kind of an error. And then they would turn around and repost them. But she put a lot of pressure on herself and later on ended up committing suicide. Mm-hmm. And here is a girl who looks like she has it all together. She has straight A's. She is an athlete. She works hard. She obviously knows how to manage her time well because, she's obviously very smart to be able to create her own tests in order, and present these. But still to the point to where she obviously felt like she didn't measure up and she couldn't be good enough. Yeah. And she constantly had to work hard at being good. But there was an obvious pressure that her mom put on her as well that made her feel the same way, to where she felt like she was never good enough and could never measure up. And we need to form these, like I said before, instead of a relation, instead of an educationship, we need to form a relationship with our kids.
Right.
To where it goes beyond education. And in my opinion, that is way more important than any academic success that they would ever have.
Right. So you're asking them more about what'd you get on the test, or it's like, hey, how are you doing? Let's go hike. So you're doing things with them, like you said, building the relationship.
Well, how did you feel when you were taking the test?
Yeah, no, those are good.
Okay. Well, let's talk through that. And instead of focusing on the score, focus on how they were doing while they were doing it, and maybe even kind of steer them in a way of, okay, well, maybe next time we can study, and we can study more, or hey, you know what? If you get a B instead of an A, congratulations.
Yeah.
You still got a B.
Right.
And we need to be okay with that. We don't need to be the best of the best of the best.
Right.
And there was one thing that, we focus so much on education to where we think that adds to success. But God in his realm, he's different. He calls us to be different. He calls us to step out and to not be normal, to step out of the norm. And there was one thing that this guy, his name is Mark Lowry, he's a Christian comedian, and he said many things, but he said something one time that really, really stuck out to me. And I really, I think about this a lot. And he said that if God calls you to be a ditch digger, you would have to step down to be president.
Right. Be in a way that,
Right. And I think that, not to say that our kids are going to be ditch diggers if they don't get this education. That's not true at all. But we need to focus on, what does God have for our kids? What route does he have for us? And for us, it is homeschooling, and it's not for everybody else. And we understand that. And we look at school in a different way, and we focus on school in a different way. We focus on academics in a different way. And we allow them to kind of trail off to where their passions are. And sometimes, we put that above academics because we see that that's where their passion is, and we see that could possibly be what their future is. The other thing that I constantly think about and struggle with is that we're looking at our kids and going, oh, well, you need to learn this now. Like in middle school, you need to learn this now so that you can do this in high school. You need to learn how to write a paper now so you can write a paper in high school. Or in high school, you need to learn how to write this paper now and cite your sources because you're going to have to do that in college. And that makes no sense to me.
Right.
Because how many times do we prepare for something in advance? There are some things that just we can't prepare for now that we have to do later on. I mean, my husband, he gets a piece of equipment for work. He sits down and he reads the entire manual before he even turns this piece of equipment on. And that's how he learns how to work it.
Okay.
That's how he learns it. And then at that point, he knows the ins and outs of it. And he has actually gone to seminars and actually taught the people who are teaching him things about their equipment because he sat down and read the manual and then learned all about it. But he would have never read that manual a year in advance.
Especially when you didn't even have
need to read the manual now because in a year you're going to need to know how to use this piece of equipment.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense. It's like, telling a toddler or telling a baby who's 5 weeks old, well, you better get up and walk now because in a year you're going to need to know how to walk.
Right.
How many times have you been in a situation to where you've needed to learn something and so you go, okay, I need to learn this now. You learn it and you do it immediately.
Right. Yeah.
So I feel like we're stressing out a lot of our kids because we're teaching them things that they don't really need to know right now. And it's not that they don't have the capacity to learn it. They absolutely have the capacity to learn it. Mm-hmm. But it's not necessary right now. So I feel like we forego that relationship with our kid because we are focusing on the education ship. So one of the things that I actually came across when we were preparing for this talk are quite a few people who actually never graduated college and are extremely successful.
Right.
And so you may look at this and go, yeah, but that's them. But why not us? Why not our kids? Why can't we prepare them to be able to go out and be creative instead of putting them on a conveyor belt to try to be like everybody else? Mm-hmm. And so, when they don't act right, they don't sit right, or they're up moving around, or something's wrong with them, then, you pick them off the conveyor belt and you throw them out because something's wrong with them. No, take that thing that's different and allow them to be able to capitalize on that.
Right.
And so I think that that's something that a lot of these people actually did.
And by having a relationship with your children, you can help form that. You can help fan the flame into those giftings and those talents that they were already given. They're already natural bend. So yeah, I get it.
Yeah. So among those who never went to college but are still successful, we have Ted Turner.
Who's that? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. You have to know who Ted Turner is, especially if you live in Atlanta.
Do you have a kid who wants to do nothing but play sports? Now, I don't think that Ted Turner was athletic. I think he just owned a lot of teams. But, hey, who's to say that your kid's not going to grow up and own a team one day?
There you go.
So, Ted Turner, worth $2.2 billion. He owned the Atlanta Braves, Atlanta Hawks, the Atlanta Flames, and the Atlanta Thrashers.
Oh, I miss them. Sorry, Philip. I loved hockey.
But you know what? He was actually kicked out of college, and he never graduated college.
Interesting.
Right. So, how about Anna Wintour? You've probably never heard of her, right?
No, I actually have not.
Okay. Well, guess what? She is the editor-in-chief of Vogue magazine. Now, how many listeners do we have whose kid loves fashion? Or loves to dress up, or loves to go to the store and buy things and dress themselves and be unique? Well, guess what? Anna Wintour, who is the editor-in-chief of Vogue magazine, never went to college. Okay, so here's one you may not have heard of. I actually had not heard of him before, but we have Larry Ellison.
Okay.
He is worth $61 billion. He is the executive chairman and chief technology officer of Oracle Corporation. All right, so is your kid technical minded?
Yes.
Yes. So he was also raised by a single mother in the Bronx.
Go, girl.
And he dropped out of college, not once, but twice.
He tried. Somebody probably told him, you should go to college. He's okay, I'll go. But, his giftings and his talents were greater. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So how about this? Does your kid like to play guitar, drums, piano? Is he musical?
At the same time. Dick Van Dyke. Yes. In Mary Poppins. Yes. Sorry, I had to go there.
Well, there's a guy named Russell Simmons, and he is considered the godfather of rap.
Oh my God!
Now that might not mean much to you. However, he's worth $340 million because he's also a best-selling author. He is the owner of a recording studio. All right, here's one that everybody knows: Steve Jobs. Mm-hmm. All right, so at the time of his death, he was worth $10.2 billion. He dropped out of college.
I heard that.
After his first semester. He didn't even make it the entire year. First semester, he dropped out of college.
And here he was more of the like hippie type, went without shoes.
Yeah.
He just kind of was up. I mean, he was an opportunist, I think, and he knew how to be in not the right space at the right time. But he's business mind. I think he didn't really have business mind. I don't think. Anyhow, I read
he thought outside the box, and he refused to conform.
Outside. Yes,
those were the two big things with him. So another computer-minded individual is Michael Dell, who is, yes, the creator of Dell Computers. He's worth $23.5 billion. And so, like so many parents, his parents actually wanted him to be a doctor. But he did not want to be a doctor. He actually did go to med school, but then he realized that his side computer business, he was refurbishing and building computers for other people, it actually took off.
Right.
And he quit school, did that, and created Dell Computers.
Yeah, wow.
So this one, I found this one really interesting. Rachel Ray.
Yeah, I love Rachel Ray.
Do you have a kid who loves to cook?
EVRO.
I know, right? Well, guess what? She's worth $60 million. She never graduated from college, and she's never even been trained in the culinary arts.
That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
But she's a big-time Food Network and daytime TV star and a best-selling author.
And she's friends with Rob Thomas. Why is that important, you say? Well, because my favorite band is Matchbox 20.
So David Geffen, do you know who he is?
I do not.
Yeah, he wasn't familiar with me. I wasn't.
He's not familiar with me either. I'm going to go out on a limb there.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with him either. However, when I look at what he's actually done, I recognize this because I've watched some movies created by his company. Wow. So he dropped out of college, not one, not two, but 3 times.
3 colleges.
3 colleges.
Wow.
And then he was working in the mailroom at a talent agency. Okay. After that, he became the co-founder of DreamWorks.
Okay, we know that. I know that. I heard that.
Yeah. And also, he founded Geffen Records, who, now this is a guy who didn't go to college. Right. He signed names like Aerosmith.
Wow, yes.
Mary J. Blige. Blink 182. Toni Braxton. Belinda Carlisle.
Love her.
Counting Crows.
Love Counting Crows.
The Cure.
Love them.
Peter Gabriel. The Eagles.
And
the list is like long.
Wow.
Yes. You know who Bill Gates is?
Yes, I do.
Well, Bill Gates actually did go to college.
Yeah.
But his right-hand man, Paul Allen, did not go to college.
Did not go to college.
He actually dropped out of college to make Microsoft. Do you think he regretted that?
No.
He's worth $20.7 billion.
Yeah, I wouldn't regret that decision either.
Exactly. So,
but they took a chance. You know, they got...
But you know what? He dropped out of college to make Microsoft. If Microsoft would have failed, guess what he could have done?
Gone back to school?
Gone back to college.
Yeah.
Because there is no age limit.
That's true. That is true.
There is no age limit on college.
Your plan B is college.
Right.
Yes. No, I have jokingly said,
So one that I actually found interesting, Brian Williams, he's a journalist for NBC News.
Okay.
So a journalist for NBC News actually did not graduate college.
Okay.
And he's very successful on the NBC News team.
Okay.
Sir Richard Branson. He was actually knighted by Prince Charles for his service and entrepreneurship. He wasn't knighted because he graduated college.
I'm just reading ahead here what you wrote, and that's what's making me giggle.
Okay.
And it's obvious that Prince Charles didn't ask him about his college education before knighting him. Let me see your college transcripts. I've got my sword.
Bring me a college transcript.
Bring it to me now. Wait, you sound a little more British. Bring it to me now. I can't talk.
All right, so we know who Sir Richard Branson is. He's the owner of Virgin Corporation, which is Virgin Airlines.
Oh, yes.
And about 200 other companies. We have Chuck Todd. And he is actually the NBC News chief, White House correspondent, and political director.
Okay.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah, so the bottom line is don't be afraid. If you're,
right. But guess what?
Afraid.
Even though Chuck Todd has done all this stuff, guess what? He can still go back to college.
He doesn't look a day over 29, sorry.
I know, right?
Sorry, in case you're listening. Chuck Todd.
So
you're right. He could always
go back to college if he needs to. So I think that we just need to think about that we need to not conform. We need to refuse to conform.
And not be afraid.
Don't conform to the norm.
It's our new sticker on our car. It just makes me think of again, the verse, in a man's heart he plans his course, but the Lord determines his steps. I think about what I did in college and what I do now. I don't do now what I went to college for.
Right. So Forbes.com says this. They say, believe it or not, much of the potential for success in your small business depends upon two things. Okay. One, your ability to effectively function physically, mentally, and emotionally. And two, how well you balance where the business stops and your personal life starts.
I like that.
And I feel like with those two things, that is what I am teaching my kids. I'm allowing them to grow mentally and emotionally. And I'm also allowing them to learn how to manage their time better, to know where their personal life starts and their business stops or their school stops. So, but notice that having a formal education is not listed in the 2 steps.
That's funny. Yeah.
So I think that the thing that I don't want our listeners to get us wrong, we're not talking your kid out of college. We're not telling you don't educate your children, because
please
schooling your children and educating them, we believe, are not the same. But we are just telling you that you need to not stress over your kids' schooling. Okay? Your relationship with your child is way more important than your child's formal education. Always. Proverbs 22:6 says to train a child in the way that he should go. All right, so it doesn't say train a child in the way that you want them to go, or train a child in the way that you wish that you would have gone. It says train a child in the way that he should go. So everyone has a different path. And I believe that it's okay to veer off the side just a bit. Go down the road less traveled. Do something different. It's okay to not conform. It's okay. We can do it. It is okay. I think that we have had this huge fear put inside of us that if our kid doesn't do this by this milestone, or this by this milestone, or if they don't go to this school, or if they don't graduate at this time, or if they don't make these grades or whatever, then they're not going to, make it. And that is not true. That is absolutely not true. So, my husband and I, we're constantly reminding ourselves that we don't have to be like everyone else. And we refuse to conform to the norm. We don't want to push them down the same track as everyone else.
True.
It's congested on that track.
Right, it is.
Kids trip and fall and get hurt. I want to allow my kid to run, soar, and thrive. So I think that today we just want to encourage parents that it's okay if their test scores don't come back that great. It's not a measure of your child. Yeah. It's really not. Yes. And you need to be okay with that. And I know that we have been brainwashed and told that it does matter. It doesn't. And I'm not saying that because my kids' test scores are bad. My kids' test scores are actually very good. I'm saying it because I truly believe it. So Romans 12:2 says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So I just wanted to leave everybody with the will that God has for your kid is not the same as what he has for your neighbor's kid. That's true. Be different. Do not conform to the norm. That's all I have. Thank you for listening to Tea of Life podcast. If you have 2 friends who need to transform every attitude of life, tell them about us. Also, right now, before you forget, go to Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, or anywhere you listen to a podcast and hit that subscribe or follow button. That way you will never miss an episode. Thanks for listening to Tea of Life podcast, and we'll see you next time.